2 years ago, and we'd like to start with Jean Mayo, whose mother and Uncle Moses and Aunt Barbara's father were sisters and brothers. That's how we're all related in the Lusk family. And so Jean would come forward and introduce her family.
Well, actually, the oldest family member was Ernest, and his daughter is Janet, who died in '72. And she had 2 children, Jan, who is a professor at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and Cordelia, who has been an RN in Fort Worth all of her married life. And then comes Edith, and that Edith was my mother, and she was a very special person, of course, to me, but not only to me, but to everybody that knew her. Her mother died when she was 13 years old in Evanston, Illinois. And when she was 16, she moved with her family, her father and 2 brothers, Fred and Willard, to Pensacola, Florida. She always said she raised her 2 brothers. She left Pensacola at the age of 32 when she married Dad. Dad took her to South Dakota, where both my brother Curtis and myself were born. Curtis is 15 months older than I am and has 4 children, a boy, Mike, and 3 girls, Karen, Kristen, and Kim. And we have 3 girls and a boy, Donna, Susan, Edith, and the boy Howard, who is with me here tonight. Hi, boy. His wife is Nancy, and their 2 children are Courtney and Will. Will's running around here. That's us.
You should all come up and we'll take a picture.
Say hi.
Say hi. Hi.
What a show lady.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
We'll pass this on to the next family.
Hi. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Is this on? Well, my wife and I have been married 55 years this September. I've married a very fine person to stick with me all these years.
Right.
And I think she should have a medal. But you want to come up here, Jeannie?
Okay.
Where's the medal?
I forgot it. And then we have 2 children, Linda, who was here last year, Linda Carlson, and James Lusk. James is the oldest. Where is Jimmy?
Jimmy.
You want to go up there? Jimmy is 6 years older than Linda. And then he had Sterling.
Come on,
Come on,
Sterling.
Sterling.
Come on, let's come back here.
Close together.
Get close together. They're going to take a picture. They want to
Okay.
take our picture.
Come here, Will.
They've been on there. They know what it's like.
Story.
Suck it in, Jim.
We want stories. We want stories.
Get nothing. We don't keep quiet.
He's noted for his stories.
Okay.
Dorothy, are you the next one?
I have no case. No. Who is it? I want to get a picture of Red Straight. Let's talk about the girly method.
I'm Dorothy Heron, and my mother was Willard's sister. And she married my father, Tom Anderson, and they have 4 children. And 3 of us are here tonight. My sister Caroline, and my sister Liz, and our brother Tom and his children are. So I'll go ahead and introduce my husband, Don, here. You want to come forward, honey? I like to tell everybody, and it's a true story, that when I had lost my first husband and I had 3 children, and Daddy used to tell me every time he saw me, he'd say, poor Dorothy Lane, nobody will ever marry her with these 3 children. And then I met Don, and he married me, and he adopted my children, and he raised them as his own. And I feel really, really blessed. And so we do too. Yeah, and this is our oldest son, Tom, and his wife, Tony, and their 3 children, Nicole, Rachel, and Stephanie. Y'all come. Yeah.
Y'all fixing to get up here or what? You know?
And then our next son is Jim, and he's here from Ocala, Florida. And we're real happy to have him with us tonight. And then our daughter Debbie and her husband Buster Howard, and their daughters Catherine and Christine.
They're going to empty the tables.
Yeah. And our daughter, our son Les is with a video camera. And his wife Alicia.
Sure, please.
And their son
It's on.
And there's Sue and Michael Laprise and their daughters. And Eric, their son.
You just had all these kids because you knew this day was
And Jesse.
Wait a minute, I gotta get back. Yeah, I need to get way back.
Tighten up, we're family. Tighten up, we're family.
I'm out of here.
Monster, you don't really look
Thank you. And so, this is the next one. And then, yeah.
Hi.
This is everybody's turn.
Oh, here, transfer.
I'm Liz Nigma, the 3rd child of Tom and Caroline Anderson, and my daughter Caroline is here, and her husband Rick, and our grandchildren Cassandra and David, and they can all come up. And I'm married to Dewey for I think 29 years. I haven't had time to figure it out. And our son Dewey Jr.
Run up there with him, Zeke. Go get with him.
Is this one of your children?
He's blonde, he don't belong to that bunch.
Zeke, come here. Come here, Zeke. Come over here. Come here.
He just wants to say hello on the mic.
Thank you.
Good boy.
Oh, yeah. I'm Caroline, and this is my husband Don, and our son Don, and I'm the 4th of the Anderson children.
And what's the big story?
It's the only time in her life she's been speechless.
Give him the mic back! Give him the mic back!
Johnny, get in there. Act like you know
I'd
him.
like to sing a little song for all of you. This one's by Elvis. Elvis.
Hey, we didn't get pictures.
Pictures. I was looking around for you. By the way, I'm her favorite niece.
Well, I'm not next in line. My sister Helen is next in line, and she was here last year, and her daughter Julie is having a baby. It was due 2 days ago. We're hoping that she's had it by now, and so that's why she's not here. She's taking care of the 3 children that Julie has, and then she has John and and Jimmy. And John is a dentist and Jimmy's a chemist. And they were here last year and we missed them. And so I'm the baby of the family, and I married a baby of his family. My husband grew up across the street from me. Hank, you want to stand up? This is Hank. And we had two beautiful daughters, Melinda.
Neither of them can make it today.
She's very inhibited.
Yeah.
And,
I have to suck it in.
Oh dear. And Cindy. Cindy, you want to come up?
Oh, and she's a shy one.
And Cindy has two boys, and we are just really pleased to have our grandson Danny here. Come on up, Danny.
Get close. Act like you know it.
Act like we care. Are you sticking your stomach in? Oh, yeah, thanks for reminding me. It's my chin showing, don't take this. It's my chin showing.
Which one?
Oh, you are rude,
She told me
really.
to. She told me to.
Oh, yeah, blame it on a child.
And we're just really pleased. My brother,
Mother had two children. I was the oldest. Caroline was second, 18 months later. And then 14 years later, Helen came. And then 3 years after that, that was 17 years after I was born, Barbara showed up.
I really am the baby.
Now, we came to Southern California in 1922. My father had a flour mill on the Santa Fe Railroad tracks in Flagstaff, Arizona. And in 1922, the farmers weren't getting anything for their wheat, so they didn't grow any wheat. So we had no business left. And we sold the house, I guess he sold the flour mill, and we came to Southern California. Now we'd been here a year when one day he took us down, one Saturday, he took the four of us down to Venice. And as far as Caroline said, we'd never had a Chinese dinner. And there was a Chinese restaurant there, so we went in and had a big feed, you know how they feed you, and we ate all we could eat. And my mother said when she came out, there was a railroad track. It was going down the middle of the street there, and she says, why don't we get on that train and settle our stomachs? So we were looking for the train, and we came across a roller coaster. And we got on those carts, which we had never seen a roller coaster in our life. And first thing I knew, I was climbing clickety up this big hill. And we got up the top. My father and I were in the front seat, and Caroline and my mother were in the second seat, and no one else on the whole thing. And my mother says, my, how was the view out there? And I turned around to see where the view was. And the thing went downhill. I never heard of, I grabbed that bar in front of me for dear life, and we never heard a squawk out of them. And after about the third hill, I thought maybe we'd lost them. I turned around to see where they are. My mother's pure white. She has a ridge, little ridge she put on each side of the peak. So when we got through, we really need our system quiet down a little bit. This was not the thing get on to settle your stomach. So we were four country bumpkins, you know, and never seen or heard one of those things. Well, I want to, I don't know if I have enough for everyone, but I have enough for each family. This is your pedigree. Now, I think where one is, that should be, I'm talking, of course, to all except you, Gene. You'd fit in here, but you'd have to change Frederick Lusk to your mother. Anyway, where it says number 1, I would say Barbara and Helen and Caroline could have their names there, and myself. And then you see our father was Frederick James Lusk, up there too. And Nellie Chapman was our mother. And then you put your spouse, they would put their spouse in there where it says spouse. The next generation back was James Weatherspoon Lusk. And that is my grandfather, and somebody here would be great-great-grandfather. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about these people that I know, what I know. Is there any questions, though, about what the information's on here?
I thought Grandma's birthday was June 23rd.
What?
I thought Grandma was born June 23rd. It's June 21st?
Well,
It is 23rd, Barbara says.
23rd?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how I got 21st then.
When did James and Jeanette come to America?
When
did James and Jeanette come to America?
Oh, well, I don't know. See, James Lusk, you see, I don't have all the information. All the information I have is what my father told me. And he couldn't remember everything, see? But this is the information I got from him. And in the case of my mother, Nellie Chapman, I got this information from her, what she could remember. Well, let's start with Frederick James Lusk. He had only had an 8th grade education, was born in Chicago, and his mother died when he was 10 years old from pneumonia. In fact, I have a letter which I got from Curtis that her sister wrote about her mother's death. Pneumonia was quite fatal. When she died, I think, in 1897, and it was very fatal. When they called the doctor, it was a lady doctor, and she found it pneumonia only in one lung. But they had very little they could do, and I don't think she took good care of herself. And she got in the other lung, and she died. Now, his job, he worked in Chicago stockyards in Chicago, and when he was about 21 years old, his salary was 5 cents an hour, and he belonged to a union. He went on strike, and they won 1 cent more an hour. 6 cents. And he came to Colorado, where he met my mother, Nell Lusk. When he came to Colorado, he worked in the clothing store, a men's clothing store. And that's where my mother met him. And I might say he was colorblind, and very colorblind. And when someone came in and said they want a red necktie, he laid the whole works off. Now, they were married in Canyon City, and they moved to Portland, Oregon, where he worked for a laundry. And he drove a horse, and the laundry buggy, what do you want to call it, 4-wheeled vehicle, to pick up the laundry, and then he delivered it to people. And in 1914, he moved the family to Roswell, New Mexico, where he went in partners with one of my mother's sister, husband, Woolsey was their name, and they bought the laundry there in Roswell. And Irving Woolsey, his brother-in-law, he ran the laundry, and my father continued to pick up the laundry with a horse and buggy. About 1917, he bought his first car to pick up laundry and deliver it. It was a Model T, and it did not have a starter on it. And I can still see him in the wintertime trying to get it started by cranking and putting hot water in the radiator and kicking the tires and saying a few words that I won't repeat here. But anyway, in 1918, we moved to Flagstaff, Arizona, and he had a flour mill there. And when the farmers quit raising wheat, why he came to Southern California in 1922. Now in 1923, that's the year Helen was born. No, 24. 24. 23? I guess you're right. Anyway, and about 3 years later, you showed up. Now, when I left home when I was 18, she was only a year old and Helen was 4, I guess. And they never really seemed like sisters to me. Caroline was a year and a half younger than I was, and I didn't know these two very well because I never really lived home again. But I went to the University of California at Davis when there's only 400 boys there. No, 1 or 2 girls, and graduated 4 years later. And my father also, when we in Southern California, he has a territory of Southern California for a new product called Klim, milk spelled backwards, powdered milk. And he was the first one to sell it to the Navy. And you all drank that orange juice. How many here? Well, my father and this man that invented orange juice worked on it together. And he had stock in the company. And a little later, he sold his stock. But Bill Sewell, who made the powdered milk, they sold the whole company to Borden. Excuse me, the Borden Milk Company. And my father got a job with them in San Francisco in charge of the dry milk products in 11 western states. And so the family moved to San Francisco in December of 28. And Caroline was still in high school. She was in her junior year. And she graduated from Lowell High School in 1930. Oh, I just got a glass there. Give me a tea there. Thank you. Anyway, I graduated in 1932 from Berkeley and went to work for Arden Farms. But 1930, Borden, beginning, it was really the start of the Depression that lasted 10 years. And most of you don't remember that. 25% of the workforce were out of work. And things were really tough. And he lost his job. And he never worked steady again as long as he lived. And he lived about to 1940 when he when he died. He was 53 years old. I might say that my mother, Nell Chapman, she was born and married in the same house in Kansas City. Her father was wealthy. He had a brick factory there. He had a lumber yard. He had a hardware store.
Furniture.
And a furniture store. And in the 1907 Depression, he lost it all. He had loaned money to a lot of people, and they owed him money, and he couldn't collect it, and he couldn't pay his debts, and his creditors took everything. So he and his wife lived with, they had three daughters, one of which was my mother, and they lived with these daughters the rest of their life. Those days they didn't have Social Security, you know. Someone had to take care of them. My mother, she went 1 year to college, and then after a year or so there, I got married to Fred Lusk. But I'm going to say that she had never worked a day in her life until my father died. And she still had two children. Barbara was, 1940, you were what, 14? Okay, and Helen was 17 or 16. And I think her first job was cooking in a high school, in the cafeteria. And then about her second job was making envelopes. Yeah, she ran a machine that made envelopes. And she worked on that until she was 68 years and retired from it. She got a small Social Security pension. But just before she retired, a friend of hers that we met in Roswell, lived in Pasadena, encouraged her to quit work and come and live with her in an apartment house. And she hadn't lived there about a couple of months when the lady died. But my mother still lived in that apartment house, but her friend wasn't there anymore. She lived a couple more weeks. She'd been 95. She died, I guess, 11 years ago, 1982. But she raised these two girls, Helen and Barbara. And I remember when they both graduated. One graduated from high school, and the other graduated from junior high school. Or one graduated from junior high school, and one graduated from grammar school, because she had me come down there, and I attended your graduation, and then she went to Helen's. They were both being held at the same time at two different schools. Oh, I want to tell you something. While she was working this, making envelopes, the streetcars and buses went on a strike in Los Angeles, and she walked. I guess it was over 5 miles from where she lived to where she made the envelopes. And the first week, on the way home, she was very tired, and she sat on a curb there to rest. And an elderly black man came along in an old jalopy and stopped and asked her if she was all right. And she told her what she was tired and she had to walk home. And he said, "You get in and I'll take you home." So he did. And she was, otherwise, there was no transportation. But she wouldn't give up that job. She was very loyal to it. Now, what I remember about James Witherspoon Lusk, and he was your grandfather too. He was born in 1844, New York City, and died in 1924. He was 80 years old. He was also in the Civil War. And he told me that the first fight that his unit was in was the Gettysburg. But you know, he didn't talk, he explained a lot. I had to ask him questions directly. And I, being about 12, 13 years old then, I didn't know all the questions I could ask today. I'd have found a lot more out. He was after the war, I guess he lived in Chicago, and that's where I guess most of the children were born, wasn't it? Evanston, just outside.
Mother was born in Evanston.
Hmm?
Mother was born in
Oh.
Evanston.
I thought I have my father born in Chicago, wasn't it? Anyway, he was in the wholesale produce market, and he died in Pensacola, Florida, and he was, I guess they shipped him up to that Rose Hill Cemetery in Chicago, Illinois, is where he was buried with his wife. He had 3 boys and a girl. Ernest Lusk was the oldest, and Ernest had 1 daughter.
I had a son, Billy, who died in infancy.
Oh, I didn't know her.
About 2 years old.
And Fred Lusk, who had 3 girls and 1 boy. And Willard Lusk, who was a lieutenant in the infantry and killed in France in the First World War. And Edith Lusk, which was Jean's mother. Now, he had a wife, Emma Manley, and I told you she died of pneumonia. And but she was born in St. Catherine, Canada, and she died in 1897. She had 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. And I don't know very much about her because I never saw her. She died 13 years before I was born. Now, Mother's father, I told you about what he owned and what he did. And he died from, I guess, had a windstorm, and he went for a walk and fell down or was blown down and hurt his head, and he never gained consciousness, and in a few days he died. In Roswell, New Mexico. And his wife, of course, lived till, that was 1916, and his wife lived till about 1951. And she lived with her daughters, all of them.
How old was she when she died? How old was she?
Well, she was 95.
You look at these ages on there, this is amazing, because in the 1800s, people, I mean, like 40 years old was
They never lived
really
that long.
old.
Yeah.
Some of these people are like 95, 70.
80.
I mean, yeah.
You have a chance.
Good, clean living.
Hey, I got a real good chance.
I remember
Yeah.
in the Easter vacation of 1928, my father went up to Borden's to see about the job and took his mother, my mother, his wife with him, and San Francisco, and they had Grandma come out and take care of the 3 girls and myself. And while I was gone that week, my father said, "I'll give you $50 or something if you'll paint the house while I'm gone." It was a shingle house, and it hadn't been painted while we lived in it, and it really ate the paint up. But I was almost through when I had the bucket up there on top of the ladder, and when it tipped over, it went on my hair, well, covered me. I had more paint in the house to. Anyway, my grandmother didn't know how to, soap wasn't going to take it out. And she went over and got, this was a very dangerous thing to get, but she went over and got a gallon of gasoline and washed my hair.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I thought I was going to eat my scalp off. And But anyway, she got the paint off.
Yeah, I bet. Jeez.
Smoking a cigar.
It's a wonder we didn't blow the place up too, or turn it, or start a fire. But she didn't know what else to use, and I didn't know anything about it either, so I let her run the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that, Mother's, that's a sixth, James Paul Chapman. Well, we talked about him, but, his wife, the one that lived to be 95 too, and then died in 1951, she was born in London, England, and in fact, she was born March 6, 1856, and arrived in the United States in 1862, and she was the oldest of two children, and she died and buried in Roswell, New Mexico. I think that's about covers.
Where did Lusk come from?
Well, they're English. I think they're originally English. When we took a tour of England, Ireland, and Scotland, and in every city and town we visited in those three countries, there were Lusks in the directory, phone directory. I didn't talk to any of them, but I looked up to see. I thought maybe they were all English, but they evidently, someone ended up in Scotland. But I think they were all English to start with. Okay.
Jim, did you read that thing? While you're in this, what's interesting?
Alamos, they'd like to ask you questions. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes.
No?
Do you know what year it was when you moved from Portland?
What year did you move from Portland?
Live in Portland?
Move from Portland.
Oh, 1914.
And where in New Mexico did you move to?
We moved to Roswell, New Mexico.
Okay.
Now, we went by boat to San Francisco, and we stayed with the Jaggers then. That was one of my mother's sisters and her husband and family. They went to Flagstaff, Arizona. We went to Roswell, but he died, and so my father came to Flagstaff to settle up. He had a grocery store there in Flagstaff, and he came there and settled it up and collected the money, and she moved to Roswell, where her sister lived. 1918. Any other questions?
We all want to thank Okemos for coming. Don has
I made some notes on each of these people,
Oh, good.
and you can get one on.
There's no question, just a special thank you for Don and Dorothy for hosting this. Real.
one more thing. Listen up.
If you want to know more about your ancestors, you know, the Mormon Church has done more on this than all the rest of religions or people in the world.
They have great chronicles.
And they have, almost in every church, I think, they have a library. Now, they have one in Carmichael. I think they have 1,600 of them in the United States that you can go to, and with their help, they will help you find some of your ancestors. But I want to tell you, you won't find any in the last 70 years. They keep that a secret. But maybe after you died, 7 years later, then they publish it, see. So anything you look for will be over 70 years ago. And they'll help you if you phone them, set a date with them, time. They have computers, and they show you how to operate them, and they'll spend several hours with you and help you in any way they can. And they sell books like this, how to look your ancestors up. See, and it shows the forms they use. And that's where I got these forms, from them.
Thank you.
Say Willard.
It's not here. I gave it to him. I had two. I left the other one. First, that we'd like to see this to keep growing. So y'all think about it.
On beach.
On the beach. We'd love to go to the beach. We'd love to go to California. Our kids were very disappointed that we hosted it here in Texas because they wanted to go see y'all wherever you were.
Detroit. I wouldn't know the
Detroit.
first thing.
Detroit.